Mark, 15 seconds until airtime.
Oregon is going to the Final Four.
The following is a Learfield presentation of the Oregon Sports Network.
And Oregon is going to play in the national championship game.
Welcome to Duck Insider.
Man, it feels great to be a Duck.
Give it to me, baby. My house. I'm taking it there.
Their competitors, they'll want to put the O on.
Three, got it!
We're going to compete to a standard every day.
The Oregon standard.
Rebound. That's been in. 1.4 to go.
The opportunity to play, put Oregon on your chest, should mean a great deal to you.
Unloads on one into left field. Back toward the wall. Gone!
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Oregon wins!
This is Duck Insider on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield, presented by On Point Community Credit Union. Better banking, local solutions. Live from the Country Financial Studio, let's talk Oregon athletics.
Busy day in the Country Financial Studio and a fabulous show last night. I got to tell you, it was awesome. Jeffrey Bassa was tremendous. Absolutely outstanding. It got even better. Coach Lanning, also spectacular. Coach's show last night was great. I'm going to get out of the way, though, because we have a really busy show. Bo Nix, Oregon quarterback, meeting with the media this week. He was outstanding.
The throw on 4th and 2 to Bucky. How much do you appreciate that play for both yourself and him? Because that is pretty much as good as it gets.
Well, I appreciate that, but honestly, when you go back and look at it, it's like, wow, that happened on 4th and 2. It was kind of just a broken down play, had a lot of time. I could have actually thrown it to him a little earlier, but knowing it was 4th and 2, I didn't want to make it a bang play. I had plenty of time, and so Bucky made a great adjustment on the ball. He did a good job of just evading his defender and got open for me, and we just connected.
On those situational splits, whether it be 3rd down, 4th quarter, whatever the case is, that you've had such dramatic improvements, is this mainly mental in terms of making a change, and what goes into that for you in those, if it is mental?
To be honest, not really as much mentally. I feel like I've had the same preparation, same sort of approach to it. It's kind of just, if anything, it's more just scheme and execution at the end of the day. Once you get to 3rd downs, it's all about running your stuff that you're comfortable with and executing at a high level.
Have you ever had a game in high school or at Auburn where you had to come back like that, and you were pretty flawless in that final 6 minutes or so of the 4th quarter? Have you just had experience doing that before?
Yeah, one that I can remember is my junior year of high school. We were playing in the 3rd round of the playoffs at Austin High School, and it was one of those back and forth type games, really high scoring game. We couldn't stop them, and they actually went up 2 scores at one point, so we couldn't ever catch up until the end of the game. We got a stop, and then went down in a 2-minute drill and scored and beat them in overtime. So I felt like that was very similar to the game that we played. The only difference was I didn't throw a pick 6, so I didn't have that in the back of my mind just kind of nagging at me. But I felt like just in the second half, it was just our approach as an offense that we went in there, and we knew they wouldn't be able to stop us if we just executed, and we went out in the second half and executed at a much better level.
You had a pretty nice come from behind win in your college debut too.
Yeah, I did. that was also one. But to be honest, in that one, we ran the ball a lot better in the second half, and so I didn't really do much in that one.
Naturally, you don't want the pick, obviously, but on review, do you chalk it up more to both a good play from the linebacker and that maybe if you just floated to Sean? I mean, wasn't necessarily a bad decision. It was more.
That's right. It was more of a kind of a situational pick. I could have thrown it quicker, put it on him. I knew I was going to be hot with the defender kind of out there on the right, coming right towards me, and it was just kind of one of those things where you'd like to have it back. At the same time, it was a bang play. We've practiced that a bunch of times, and at the end of the day, it's just unfortunate, and there's no excuse for it.
You mentioned the schematic change, without giving away everything, but I mean, from what's been seen, what is it that you and Kenny have done together to make the changes that we see what the results are?
Well, I think the most important thing is doing what you're good at on third down. And I mean, you obviously get in third down situations. It's all about first and second down, getting into short, third and mediums, third and shorts, to where you stay out of the third and long range, because anybody in a third and long is not going to be very good statistically. And so when you can stay out of those and then run your base plays on third and medium to short, run the stuff that you're good at, that's what I feel like is most important for a quarterback, doing stuff they're comfortable with.
Your success offensively in your 4 years, you've never played in front of an offensive line that's got 3 guys ranked in the top 40 at PFF's offensive line. How much has just the play of the offensive line been able to give you just this year the opportunity to make plays?
I mean, it's huge. I mean, the stats crazy that we're the only team, the FBS, that hadn't allowed a sack. That's incredible through 4 games, but it all goes to them. And it's the leadership and the experience we have up front. You know, we have a bunch of protection meetings, and we're all on the same page, and that, I think, has a lot to do with it. But it's just very, it's kind of a pride thing, you know, up front. They believe in themselves. They take pride in it. They are sure to kind of make the right checks. And if something happens that's crazy, even if the times that I've thrown it, maybe been knocked down, they'll come back and say, man, that's our bad. We got to keep you up. And I'm like, that's awesome that they even think about that. Because I didn't think anything of it. It was just like a play to me, but they take such pride in the little things that even if I throw it and get knocked down, they still take it pretty harsh. So it just speaks to their character and their competitiveness and the guys up front that we have.
What answers have you guys identified for the red zone in particular, when obviously you don't want to be settled?
Yeah, you know, that was something that we took from the game. We'd been pretty high efficiency in the red zone this year, and then they had a good plan, to be honest with you. You got to give Washington State credit for what they did in the red zone. They were very aggressive when you got there, and so we knew on video it was going to be tough to score in the red zone, and we didn't do our jobs, and so we in the first half there we kicked too many field goals. But that's definitely a point of emphasis this week, something to get better on.
Now you've done a handful of games, and everybody starts adjusting, picking up on tendencies and stuff. Mm-hmm. How prepared, again, not giving away anything, but just how prepared do you have to be for things like turning to the tight ends in the red zone when Terrence has had a lot there?
Yeah.
Between the 40s, Detroit leads the country in yards. Between the 40s, you're looking for big plays. Well, teams are going to start to pick up on that. They need to guard them.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have obviously really good coaches that look into our tendencies and see what we've done, so maybe we can change a few things. And I mean, at the end of the day, you don't want to give away too much, but you still want to do what you're good at. And so if that's maybe throwing it to a particular guy who's good in this situation, then you just kind of have to let the defense stop you. And if they stop you, then you make an adjustment. But until then, you don't want to get in your own way and change something that's not necessarily you have to.
How do you go about preparing for a cornerback as good as Caillou? Obviously, you have one in practice in Christian, but do you throw at Christian more this week because you have to try and thread the needle a little bit?
Again, that all goes back to situational football. I think when the times are there, we have to do a good job of executing. We're not going to necessarily throw away from him because we got to stay within our scheme and stuff, but you definitely have to respect him as a player. We've seen in the past, watch him on video, his technique, and see all the good things that he does. But at the same time, we got to stay confident in the receivers and have to go out there knowing that he's probably going to get a good play or two because he's a really good player, and that's just part of the competition.
What are your thoughts on
so reliable for you as a receiver?
You know, he does everything right, even the details. He knows. He's played a lot of football. Ran a lot of routes, and he just does everything right within the system. He knows what we're looking for. He's very coachable. He listens to if I have something. So, hey Chase, maybe try something like this. He'll do it, and if it doesn't work, we'll talk about it. If it does work, we'll continue to do it. And he tells me all the time. He's very smart, knowledgeable of defenders and type of routes. So he tells me stuff all the time. We get great feedback. But and then at the end of the day, I think probably his catch-to-drop ratio is probably extremely high. I can't think of one that he's dropped. So he's just very reliable, very consistent, and he makes plays when his number's called.
same thoughts on Troy?
Same thing with Troy. He's a very, very, very smart player. You get him out there on the field. He's very savvy. So if he's running a route that's supposed to be like this, drawn up, he's just very instinctual, and he may change it just a little bit to get a little bit more open. And me and him, we just have a good feel of the game right now. We kind of are in really good sync. I know the little tendencies that he has, how he's going to adjust and get open, and that's really important.
You're new to this rivalry. What have your teammates told you about last year's game with Stanford?
Well, I've heard quite a few things about Stanford, and at the end of the day, you just got to respect your opponent each week, and historically they've been really good and have presented challenges for us, but at the same time, we know we're really good. And so we just have to go out there and play like it. And again, it goes back to playing Oregon and playing against ourselves each and every day and be the best team that we can be on Saturday.
When you arrive at a new school like this, do you actually go and maybe familiarize yourself with some of the rivalries and what's kind of happened recently, or what's that process? Yeah,
that's important. And then it's just locker room talk. You kind of hear it when things come up. And then national football, or like college football national stage, you kind of know that Oregon and Stanford's always been a really good game, and there've been some really good players playing in it, and historically it's just a good one to watch, and so we know that's what we're going to get Saturday.
Your coaches and teammates have really praised just your leadership skills coming into a new program. How do you feel like, we get to see you here, we get to see you on the field, but what are some things you do behind doors to really create those relationships and kind of earn the respect that you've earned?
That's a good question. I think, the most important part about being a leader is like meeting them where they are. So if they're kind of a guy that is really good, they're ahead of things, and they know what's going on, then you kind of don't have to necessarily be as much of a leader towards them, because they kind of lead themselves. Other guys, you got to bring them along a little bit more and kind of help them out and make sure they're studying the playbook, making sure that they're doing the right things on the field, and then it's all about your the presentation of how you talk to them. And obviously just I've had a lot of experience doing that. I've messed up quite a few times being in a leadership role, and throughout my experience, throughout my journey, I've kind of learned just the do's and the don'ts when it comes to leadership. And at the end of the day, you just got to love them and show them that you love them, and when they know that and they see that, they start to trust you, and when they trust you, it's easy to communicate.
I feel like this whole opportunity, but including the results you've had the last several weeks, Bo, that this is redefining you. I mean, clearly you have to be aware of what's been said and perception and things like that, both back at Auburn and in the SEC and et cetera, and nationally. Do you feel like that this is redefining, that this is an opportunity to rewrite, that the book's not finished yet? Yeah, I think this is just a good opportunity to kind of turn the page and just obviously it's not starting over, because I've done a lot of good things in the past, but at the same time it's a chance to just continue to play football and continue to just fix some things and become as good as I can, and as good as I can be, and continue to move on and grow as a player and as a leader and as a teammate, and as a guy that's being coached pretty hard by his coaches. And so I wouldn't necessarily say it's redefining me, because I was comfortable in who I was before that. And a lot of the things, like, it goes back, a lot of the things people don't really understand, and a lot of things go into it. And so but moving forward, I think that it's just all about winning games and continue to do what I'm doing to be the best teammate I can be.
That's Bo Nix, Oregon quarterback, meeting with the media this week ahead of the Saturday 8 o'clock kickoff against Stanford. Coming up tonight, the big weekend for Oregon athletics begins. 7 o'clock, number 1 UCLA in town to face Oregon soccer at Pape Field. You really should be at Pape Field. But if you can't get there, the guy who's directing Duck Insider's video stream today, Ryan Milano, will be on the call. You can watch on Pac-12 Insider and, of course, listen on KWVA. And with that, we're going to come back, talk a little bit more soccer, and John Platz, the analyst from the Stanford radio network, previews the matchup after this on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Hey Duck fans, we're all about protecting our home turf here in Eugene. You should do the same for your home with Country Financial Insurance. Most home insurance doesn't account for inflation, but with Country Financial, yours can. If something happens to your home, make sure you can rebuild the same house in the same place. Call a local representative or 866-COUNTRY and get a solid defense for your home. Home insurance policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Casualty Insurance Company, or Country Preferred Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois. Property must meet age and condition requirements, which vary by state.
From the weight room to the classroom, on the field and off it, On Point proudly supports University of Oregon athletics because student athletes do so much more than bring us pride on game day. They bring our entire community together in Eugene and all across Oregon. So whether you're watching the game in the stadium, at home, or at your favorite local business, their success makes all of us stronger. On Point Community Credit Union, onpointcu.com. Federally insured by NCUA, Equal Housing Opportunity.
your daily dose of Oregon athletics. This is Duck Insider from Learfield.
Hi, I'm Smokey Bear, and I made an assistant to help you out, because only you can prevent wildfires.
Hey, Assistant Smokey Bear. Call me Papa Bear, because I'm grilling up dinner. Do you get it?
Yes, good job.
So, what should I do with all these coals?
Don't just toss them out. Put them in a metal container because those embers can start a wildfire.
I understand. The stakes are high.
Ha, 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 ha.
Learn more at SmokeyBear.com.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Uh-oh, Brad's buzzed.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's starting with the woots. And now a speech.
I just want to say that friendship is about heart and brain. Who's with me?
Good thing is, he knows when he's buzzed.
And my brain is saying, when it's time to go home, somebody call me a ride.
Love that guy.
Me too.
Know your buzzed warning signs? Call for a ride when it's time to go home. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
We're back inside the Country Financial Studio. Duck Insider presented by On Point Community Credit Union. Coming up tonight, 7 o'clock at Pape Field. God, that's a huge matchup. I am so excited for Oregon soccer against UCLA. Hope that it's a great environment. Fans, head out. If you can't, though, again, Ryan Milano's got you covered on the Quack Video produced live stream. Also, another night event. 8 o'clock on Saturday. We've been talking about it. The Coming Home Light Show presented by OCCU in between the first and second quarters. Yeah, first and second quarters. God, it's one of the coolest images that we get of Autzen Stadium every single year. I encourage you to download the GoDucks mobile app ahead of time for that OCCU light show for Coming Home in between the first and second quarters. I saw Ron asking and saying, hey, I don't love holding up my expensive phone in the air during the game. I miss the old school flashlights. Hey, if you still got one of the wristbands, bring it. The more lights, the better. The cool thing with the app, though, if you haven't experienced it in person, is that it syncs up. So there's different flashing and colors that'll happen. It's a really cool site. I encourage you all to check it out. Download that GoDucks app ahead of time. Earlier this week, actually yesterday afternoon, I got the chance to talk with John Platz. He's been doing Stanford radio for a long time, and he had a lot of great information about this matchup. The view from the other side of what I think is still a Northern Division rivalry. We talked with John Platz, previewing Stanford and Oregon. Previewing Oregon and Stanford. A lot of storylines to get to. And I want to start first by just saying thanks to John for coming on the show. John's joining us via Zoom. Going to be up at Autzen Stadium here shortly on the call on the Stanford Radio Network. John, how many years behind the mic is this for you now?
Joey, thank you for having me, first of all. And on football, it's year number 13.
All right.
And for basketball, I've got 34 years in. So I started very, very young.
I like it.
Yeah, so I'm pretty dialed in with all the Stanford stuff.
So Mike Jorgensen, who's been doing football analyst on the Oregon Sports Network now, this is his 33rd season, John. So I was starting to think about, like, yourself, Jorgie. There's not a very big group of you guys that have been doing broadcasts like this for that long. So I say, hey, congratulations, and thanks for always taking the time to chat with a schmuck like me. Thank you.
Oh, I love talking anything Pac-12 for as long as it is the Pac-12, and we hope it remains firm despite the machinations the last couple months. But, Joey, glad to be with you.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this Stanford team. I thought, I'm going to be honest with you, we do a pick segment for the Pac-12, John, every week. I was all in on Stanford beating Washington last week. Didn't work out for me in our pick segment, but I felt like in the game against USC, I thought the Cardinal played them really tough, and the final score wasn't a true indication of how that game ended up. What's been your assessment of the season, and was I crazy for making that selection last week?
I'll take a middle of the road answer there. For Stanford, I think, it's been kind of hard to analyze, truthfully, the first couple of games here, the most recent two against USC and in Washington. I will tell you that those two quarterbacks, I know Oregon doesn't play USC and plays Washington later. Those two transfer quarterbacks in Caleb Williams and Michael Penix Jr., they can play, and they are real difference makers. And I don't know that it's maybe the Stanford brain trust, or certainly Stanford fans appreciated the extent to which those two young men really really can test a defense, hammer a defense at times. So I think that part has been a little surprising to me, how good they were. And you pair that, Joey, with the schemes that Lincoln Riley and Kalen DeBoer have. I mean, they're really sort of next levelish stuff. So you marry the talent of the quarterback and the schemes, and Stanford got pummeled on that side of the ball, on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that's part of it. I don't think a lot changes for Stanford. They've still got pieces and are capable. Now they have lost a piece in E.J. Smith, Emmitt Smith's son, who was the lead running back for Stanford. He was announced earlier this week as being out for the year. So I think Stanford's potential remains. Oregon, I think, is in the realm of Washington and Oregon. So it's kind of a bam, bam, bam for Stanford early in the season. But at some point, the Stanford talent is going to assert itself against his opposition.
You know, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask you about how that running back group changes. You know, losing E.J. Smith, how big of a deal is that in the overall context of the season?
Well, it's a big deal because Stanford was a little on the thin side coming into the season in that role. Now, one of Oregon's finest ever in high school, Casey Filkins, assumes the role. I thought, Joey, he ran even better than his 20 carries for 100 yards last week in Seattle showed. Saw patience, saw the quick feet, and he's really eager for this next step. So I guess the issue for Stanford is Casey's going to have to shoulder, Joey, a lot of the load because behind him there is a drop-off. You got Caleb Robinson, Brendan Barrow, names that I'm sure are unfamiliar to Oregon fans. Those young men have not been tested much in game action at all. So it behooves Stanford to keep Casey Filkins upright.
Tell Duck fans a little bit about the offensive line. Everyone from the outside looking in is always like, hey, that's a good group on the offensive line for Stanford. Is that the case this year? Is that a strength for the Cardinal?
I think they're solid. Certainly the physical profiles of them are good. Now, last year they underperformed by the admission of the Stanford coaching staff. This year it's been better. Now, there have been some injuries to that group. Miles Hinton at right tackle, mammoth right tackle. Father Chris Hinton was a longtime NFL O-lineman. He missed the Washington game. We're not sure about the Oregon game. So that's been a bit of an issue. Now, against Washington, Stanford gave up 8 sacks. Now, were those coverage sacks? Was there somebody didn't win their one-on-one? Was it the Washington defense being a little bit better than advertised? Who knows? I think the Stanford coaches have a better angle on that than I do. I think the Stanford offense, I characterize the O-line they've been solid. Probably can play better, though.
What's the identity of this Stanford offense this year, John? I mean, there's the outside perspective, similar with the O-line, that they're always going to kind of out-physical you and pummel you. Is that the offense's identity again this year?
Recency bias, right? That's the word you use. There certainly is some physicality. I think it's a tick down below what it was last decade. But for Stanford, I don't want to say it's untapped, but the thing that Stanford has, and Oregon fans saw it, I think, more than any other team last year, was the big receivers or the pass catchers and the downfield throws. Stanford has not played that card, pardon the pun, a lot this year. But I think you're going to see more of it, just sort of given the issue at running back with the depth. But again, all those guys are back from last year. They're all big. And I use the word, Joey, pass catchers because I want to embrace the tight ends too. But all those guys are 6'2" and above. Most are upperclassmen. Most have played a lot of game minutes. And I just think that some of the brighter moments of the Washington game were Tanner McKee with downfield throws. Yeah. And I think you're going to see more of that in the game on Saturday because it's a weapon that Stanford has, a combination of Tanner McKee, big quarterback at 6'6", and all those big dudes on the outside as well as the tight end.
Yeah, boy, I got to tell you, I look at Tanner McKee, and he sure looks the part. I mean, he seems like he still has a lot more untapped potential.
Well, he does. I mean, Pro Football Focus, the thing we all look at the end of every weekend, had Tanner McKee number 1 in the USA this past weekend, right? The loss at Washington, number 1 in clean pocket rating. So you strip out the sacks, and Tanner McKee was awesome, and he was. He has a feel for the pocket. He can throw outside the numbers. Obviously, the seam routes. He's pretty unflappable in there. His history is compelling. He's a cancer survivor, so. Tough kid mentally, and if he has time, he's going to hurt whomever he plays. I mean, I just think that the Stanford receivers are a tough cover as a group, for even the best of the secondaries or the back seven in college football.
Well, I'll tell you, you and I are on very much the same wavelength. A lot of the questions, as you can imagine, John, around the media sessions at Oregon this week have been about that subject. And Christian Gonzalez, transfer cornerback in from Colorado, he was talking about how he likes the challenge of going up against the bigger receivers. It seems like that could be a real key in this game for both sides.
I think it could be. Now, again, David Shaw, back to your earlier question, David Shaw's philosophy, in part owing part to his NFL background prior to getting into college, is you run it and you defend the run and you do it with physicality. And he still aspires to do that. But if it's not getting you what you want, if you're not getting the W's or you're not having 10 play drives, then you course correct. And he's got that weaponry. It's one thing, Joey, if you got like a one tight end and one big receiver, opposing teams can key on that. But when you throw, three wide receivers out there and a tight end, like they're all weapons. I mean, Elijah Higgins is going to play in the NFL. John Humphreys is 6'5". Bryson Tremaine was Stanford's best receiver last year until he broke his foot in the Oregon game. Oregon fans I know all those names. Ben Urosic, has Mackey consideration at tight end. Yeah. And there are guys behind them that have size. So I think that if Stanford upside surprises, whether win or play close on Saturday, it's going to be because of the Stanford pass game.
Continuing talking Oregon and Stanford coming up. Late kick, 8 o'clock, and I know Coach Shaw was a little bit disappointed by that. He's been outspoken about that, hasn't he, John, that he doesn't like those later kickoffs. He's kind of said that the last few years.
Well, I love the fact that Coach Shaw's not afraid to say what's on his mind, and the reason why that's good, it's good in any circumstance, generally speaking, but he's all for the student athletes and their welfare in this time where we're all thinking about TV revenues and how we can maximize them. Well, what about the arriving home at 4 a.m. kind of stuff? Stanford had a 7:30 kick last week at Washington, 8 o'clock tonight, 8 o'clock next week at home against Oregon State, 7:45 in South Bend the next week, where we're going to get home about 5 a.m. So that's 4 weeks of late night, late arrival type stuff. So can't say I disagree with them. We all know the reality. We all know that contracts exist. I think David Shaw, he asked a question, gives you an honest answer. I think he'd like to see the next contract take that into account a little bit.
Well, I can't disagree with him, and I'll tell you, Rob Mullins, Oregon athletic director, was on the show here on Duck Insider just a couple days ago, and he said he was as disappointed as anybody with an 8 o'clock kickoff. It's hard on fans, harder on student athletes. I think we can all agree, but I don't know. Can't solve the world's problems. You and I can't, but we can try, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we all understand that the TV needs its slots. I guess the compromise would be, maybe you do 2 in a row, but then you're taken out of consideration for that next week, something like that.
I liked that idea, and I'm glad that John and I were able to talk about that because Coach Shaw has been very outspoken about this for a long time. I'm fascinated to see where this all goes in the future of these TV rights deals. We're going to continue with John Platz, the view from the Stanford side of this matchup as Duck Insider continues on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Dear gas prices, Toyota is the #1 retail brand for electrified vehicles for 22 years. That says it all. Toyota hybrids. Find yours at toyota.com. Toyota, let's go places.
Based on manufacturer estimate CY 2000 through 2021 sales.
At Shadow Hills Country Club, our all-inclusive event pricing allows us to take care of all of the details while you enjoy your event. Our wedding garden, expansive grounds, ballroom, and meeting rooms can accommodate any size event and come complete with full catering and service staff. From weddings to business and social events, Shadow Hills offers the benefits of a resort atmosphere and the peace of a country setting just minutes from downtown Eugene. For more details, call us today or go to shadowhillsevents.com.
Dear gas prices, Toyota is the #1 retail brand for electrified vehicles for 22 years. That says it all. Toyota hybrids. Find yours at toyota.com. Toyota, let's go places.
Based on manufacturer estimate CY 2000 through 2021 sales.
You're listening to Duck Insider. Duck Insider on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
To your children's eyes to see the true magic of a forest. It's a storybook world for them. You look and see a tree. They see the wrinkled face of a wizard with arms outstretched to the sky. They see treasure in pebbles. They see a windy path that could lead to adventure. And they see you, their fearless guide through this fascinating world.
Find a forest near you and start exploring at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Duck Insider, presented by On Point Community Credit Union. Joey Mack in the Country Financial Studio. Brad asking, do you know if the Spencer Webb helmet stickers are available anywhere? That's a great question. I don't know for sure. I have not seen them, I'll be honest, at the Duck store or available on any of the online stores. So I'm thinking that's probably just going to be a team honoring thing, Brad, but I will inquire. You're probably not the only one who would ask about that. I think it's a great question. I will ask. And I do want to tell everybody, I hope I'm not jumping the gun and anybody around Oregon marketing is going to be mad at me for saying this, but there will be a really cool recognition for Spencer Webb, in addition to what happened around the Pac-12 last week with the 4-yard lines all being painted yellow across the Pac-12. What a great gesture. There will be a little bit more of a recognition, I should say. I think that's probably the best way I can say that in the game, during the game at Autzen Stadium on Saturday. So fans that are in attendance, I think you'll enjoy it. You'll be part of something special. Continuing our conversation with John Platz, he is going to be the analyst on the Stanford broadcast coming up from Autzen Stadium, and we continue hearing about this Cardinal team, and I did ask him, of course, keys to success for Stanford, and I will warn you, Duck fans, we did talk about some of the big-time games between Oregon and Stanford over the last few years. Some of the ones that John has fond memories of, we don't. Fascinating to me is the idea of it used to be when Oregon and Stanford had their battles of the last decade, it was a clash of styles. And now Oregon seems like Kenny Dillingham, offensive coordinator, maybe is taking a page out of the Stanford book. Some of these bigger formations that the Ducks have been running. So I got to tell you, John, from an Oregon fan's perspective, it's like, hey, the Duck offense is doing some things that Stanford used to do to beat Oregon. It's kind of interesting seeing these bigger formations. Are we going to see the old Stanford elephant package this week, and are we going to see that from both offenses, you think?
Well, it's there certainly for Stanford. I would say they're not running it as often as they did, but David Shaw always has that ogre package. We call it phone booth on the air sometimes, but short yardage. Now I will say Stanford, harkening back to some of those Cardinal Duck games of the last 10, 12 years and more recently than that, have the big back, right? The 220-pound back, Cameron Scarlett out of Portland, Tyler Gaffney in the 2013 Oregon Stanford game carried the ball, Joey, 45 times. That's a Stanford all-time record. So Stanford doesn't have that, absent E.J. Smith, who's out for the game. They don't have that 220-plus pound back to run that play. Now, having said that, they'll still try. I mean, Casey Filkins has shown an ability to see the crease and with the quick feet just kind of dart into it. But I don't think Stanford, you'll see as much of the heavy packages as Stanford has run in the past.
We started this conversation talking a little bit about the defense and how Washington and USC got to the Cardinal a little bit. I want to zero in on that. John, tell us a little bit about the defense. What is the Stanford defense strength and maybe weakness this year?
Well, they've switched this year from a 3-4 to a 4-3. Stanford got gashed on the ground last year toward the end of the season, considerably so in certain games. And that I think the scheme has helped somewhat. Stanford has a lot of experience and speed at the inside linebacker, I guess the linebackers positions now with the 4-3, and the trust there is that they can get into those gaps somewhat, and also be rangy when there's sort of one less linebacker. Stanford has a 5-star edge true freshman named David Bailey out of Mater Dei High in Southern California, the great program. He's getting his feet wet. I think the expectations when you're a 5-star are enormous from the jump. And there have been fits and starts with David, but he is a talent, and who knows when he's going to have that learning curve game. I think Stanford's strength probably is the secondary, not unlike the wide receivers. A lot of experience back there. Kaiu Kelly, number 17, that you'll see on Saturday night. Projected as a sort of second day pick. Not sure that he'll get there, but he'll certainly be drafted. The best of Stanford's corner. They got a big corner, Ethan Bonner, on the other side. This free safety, Kendall Williamson, has been arguably playing the best of the secondary guys. So mostly it's experience back there as opposed to the lights out talent. But I think Bo Nix will find a challenge throwing the football against that secondary.
Continuing with John Platz, he'll have the call on the Stanford side of the radio network coming up with that 8 o'clock kickoff from Autzen Stadium. I'm always fascinated, and you touched on this a little bit with this year's Oregon team, John, kind of the thoughts of Stanford. And I always like to ask, like, what is the view of Oregon football right now? Like, if you're a Cardinal fan, you look at Oregon, what are the first few things that come to mind maybe for a Stanford fan thinking about the Ducks?
Utmost respect, tough game. Elation when you win, and that's not always true when you beat teams otherwise in the conference. And it's always been a fun game. I mean, you go back decades and you pick out one or two at 49-42, Joey Harrington 2001. Or if you're a Stanford fan, 09 it was 51-42. Michael James, Toby Gerhart. We had the whole contrast in styles thing. We've had a couple overtime games, right? So that makes it exciting. But make no mistake. Oregon has a win over Oregon has propelled Stanford into BCS championship games or Rose Bowl games, which for Stanford is enormous. It would be for any conference school, but just the talent. I mean, the Michael James and DeAnthony Thomas and the backs since then. I mean, it's such a challenge athletically to play Oregon with the speeds there. Certainly the games in Autzen are challenging because of the great fan base. So Stanford has in recent years, and I think will continue into the indefinite future, be up for the Oregon game and just be over the moon if they can get a W.
Yeah, shoot, I got to tell you, the view from the Oregon fan base to answer that question flip side is very simple. This might be the most difficult game of the last 15 years, 20 years for the Ducks. I mean, there's no question that for the longest time, this game determined who won the North, and in a lot of ways, who won the Pac-12. That makes it a fun one.
Well, it does, and I will say, sort of cataloging all-time greatest wins, because I'm having done this for so long, I'm something of a historian on Stanford football. I mean, some of the most improbable Stanford wins are against the Ducks in recent years. I mean, 2012, Oregon was number one and rolling. I mean, rolling. And Kevin Hogan is a new quarterback. We weren't sure how well he could throw the football, and he never was a lights out passer, although he became very efficient. But he had enough in that 2012 game, and then the overtime win, and I mean that was the over the moon thing, because all of us we beat Oregon. We beat Oregon in Autzen. And then 6 years later, the game in 2018 where Stanford was way down, right? But then Stanford gets the fumble return, all the way back, the 80-yarder or whatever, after being down, 31-10 or something like that, and win the game in overtime. And the terrible, I felt bad objectively for the Oregon, the freshman who fumbled, and Stanford was able to get even. But I've never seen Joey a more wow quarterback than that, and that includes Andrew Luck, than Justin Herbert was in that 2018 game. He was 25 of 27. I mean, I was on the sideline at that time. I'm in the analyst booth now, but like you, and Justin Herbert was just throwing dimes. And Stanford had Paulson, a Debo corner. He's now starting with the New Orleans Saints. So how Stanford won that game, sort of like 2012, it's unbelievable. So this game has juice. There's no question.
Oh man, you got so many Duck fans going just now with all the different memories, and there have been games where Stanford's favored in the odds makers, and then there's a win down at Stanford for Ducks. I mean, that's why this game's been so much fun. Well, for this game, you touched on a lot of it. We've covered a lot. Sum it up if you could for us, John. Stanford wins. If what happens, what are the keys to success?
Stanford wins if it doesn't get bitten by the turnover bug. Stanford has coughed it up, either fumble or interception, 11 times in the first three games. So you got to have that be normal. But then it's downfield throws. It's David Shaw, whether it's part of the game plan or because Oregon's front seven is stout and the run game isn't working as the Stanford coaches want, throwing the ball downfield a lot to those big receivers and scoring a lot of points that way. So I think that's the formula for Stanford, to score points to keep up with Oregon. I do think the Ducks will score one way or another. It would be helpful to the Stanford cause if the secondary can defend the passes or pick one or two off of the throws of Bo Nix, because again, I just believe Stanford has to keep up with Oregon on the scoreboard, and then they'll have a chance.
John, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Looking forward to hosting you at Autzen Stadium. We'll have to catch up pregame, all right? I got to shake your hand for the first time in like 5 years.
Yeah, look forward to it, Joey. Thank you.
Great time with John Platz. So a lot of great information. This has been a battle over the last 10, 15, 20 years between Oregon and Stanford, and it seems like whoever wins this game, usually pretty good odds they're going to be the Pac-12 champion. We'll see what happens coming up 8 o'clock kickoff on Saturday. We got the Slocum Center Minute, learning a little bit about concussions from our experts at the Slocum Center. Then Steve Stevens, we'll hear from him next on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Welcome to the Slocum Center Minute. Slocum Center physicians are located here in Eugene and are the official orthopedic team physicians for your beloved Oregon Ducks. With me today, I have Dr. Michael Keister, who specializes in non-surgical sports medicine and is an expert in concussion management at Slocum Center for Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. Dr. Keister, sports-related concussions continue to be in the news these days. Can you give us a little background on what causes concussions and if there are different types of concussions?
A concussion may be caused by any blow to the body or to the head. Anything that makes the brain shake back and forth in the skull is going to cause that brain to move around and does damage to the cells of the brain. Now, it's not a injury that we can see typically with MRIs or CAT scans. It's a cellular injury. It affects the way the brain works at a microscopic level, not how it looks on an MRI or a CAT scan. We used to talk about grades of concussions, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. We don't talk about that anymore. Is what we talk about is really more of duration of symptoms. So I'm much more concerned about somebody who has a concussion that lasts for 3-4 weeks than I am with symptoms only lasting 2 or 3 days. Now, that being said, any concussion is serious, and we try to avoid minor concussion talk, but we're much more concerned if those symptoms last longer.
I know I asked you about technology these days and the advancements in it, but with concussions I get a sense that it's more visual, working one-on-one with people, and not technology that's made it easier to work with concussions.
Exactly. Like I said, the CAT scans and MRIs rarely show us anything. There's some advanced imaging being done trying to map out some of the cellular function of the brain, and that may show us something in the years to come. But right now, it's really the input of the parents, the teachers, the athletic trainers, the coaches, really getting an idea of where that person's at with their symptoms and trying to work with them as best as we can.
What advice, doctor, do you have for parents and coaches of young athletes to prevent concussion injuries?
Yeah, so we try not to talk too much about prevention. We try and talk more along the lines of minimizing risk, because we just don't think we can prevent all of these injuries from happening, whether it's with football or basketball or soccer or crashing a bicycle. Concussions do happen because the brain is vulnerable. There used to be discussion of whether special football helmets or mouth guards would help decrease that risk. And that just hasn't panned out that well. One of the things that we're really pushing is education. Education for the athletes so that they know what the signs and symptoms are, but more importantly, that they know the way to hit, to tackle, to be tackled, and also looking at educating coaches as well. In high school football and at the youth level, you'll see more coaches being certified by USA Football with their Heads Up program. And also at the high school level this year, Oregon is one of the states in the nation that's putting in time restrictions as far as when the coaches are going to be actually allowing full contact with the kids. So no more than about 30 minutes, 2 or 3 days a week this year, to try and again minimize that risk of blows to the head.
I know we talk about athletes at the collegiate level, professional, high school even, but I would imagine that younger athletes, kids sports, Pop Warner, even young kids just out playing, parents got to be aware of concussions for that group as well.
Exactly. There's no age limit to the brain's vulnerability when it comes to sports. Now, certainly we don't see the numbers of concussions in the youth sports level that we see at high school and college, and that's mainly because of the forces involved. Those kids just aren't hitting each other as hard.
Those collisions are not as big.
big.
Exactly, but we still certainly see those injuries, so it's still something that we have to be aware of, and that's one of the important pieces of the education component, is really trying to get high school coaches and the youth coaches on board with the same terminology, the same language of proper tackling, proper hitting, and also being able to recognize those signs and symptoms of concussion.
Dr. Keister, valuable information. Thanks for being with us today. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
This was the Slocum Center Minute, brought to you by Slocum Center for Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, the official orthopedic sports medicine team physicians for University of Oregon Athletics since 1967.
From the weight room to the classroom, on the field and off it, On Point proudly supports University of Oregon Athletics because student athletes do so much more than bring us pride on game day. They bring our entire community together in Eugene and all across Oregon. So whether you're watching the game in the stadium, at home, or at your favorite local business, their success makes all of us stronger. On Point Community Credit Union, onpointcu.com. Federally insured by NCUA, Equal Housing Opportunity.
Hey Duck fans, we're all about protecting our home turf here in Eugene. You should do the same for your home with Country Financial Insurance. Most home insurance doesn't account for inflation, but with Country Financial, yours can. If something happens to your home, make sure you can rebuild the same house in the same place. Call a local representative or 866-COUNTRY and get a solid defense for your home. Home insurance policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Casualty Insurance Company, or Country Preferred Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois. Property must meet age and condition requirements, which vary by state.
This is Duck Insider, presented by On Point Community Credit Union on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
This is an important message from the Mine Safety and Health Administration. Mining fatalities, accidents, and injuries are preventable. Taking a minute to approach your task safely can protect you and your fellow miners from injury and death. Staying alert and focused can keep you safe. Do it safe. Do it right. Whether buckling a seatbelt or securing equipment, these quick safety measures can prevent injuries and fatalities. Take time. Save lives. For more resources, visit MSHA.gov.
Farming is dangerous. There's dangers all around us.
We go through safety training and try and do these things to make sure accidents don't happen.
You don't want to hit a gas pipe because that's your life. The other part of it is if you hit certain things, you're liable for it.
Farm Safe 811 starts with you. Always call 811 and wait for any underground lines to be marked.
Always keep safety in the back of your mind. Just stay humble.
For more information, go to farmsafe811.org.
Back inside the Country Financial Studio, Duck Insider, presented by On Point Community Credit Union. Going to hear from Steve Stevens coming up in just a moment. Time for our Pet of the Week, brought to you by our friends at Dove Lewis. Every week in a home game, you'll see it at Autzen Stadium up on the video board. This week, Jackson, 15 years old, still a puppy at heart, loves the beach, snuggling with his stuffed alpaca. That's awesome. And sleeping 15 hours a day. That's awesome. And, you know, I want you to know that the submission owners of Jackson's family, they said GoDucks at the end of their submission. I mean, that's probably going to get you a win. Pet of the Week always brought to you by our friends at Dove Lewis, Oregon's only nonprofit 24/7 emergency animal hospital. And I will tell you, Jackson, I appreciate that you weren't just, like, ducked out in duck gear. You don't need to put, like, the cute bandana on the dog. Like, the dog can still just be an awesome Oregon fan on its own. Speaking from someone that has never once put anything more than a harness on my dog. And that's how it will be. Steve Stevens, Oregon defensive back, meeting with the media. He talked about a number of different things this week, including how you go about slowing down some of these bigger-bodied Stanford pass catchers for the Cardinal.
Stanford has caused Oregon some heartache over the years, including last year. Just what's your guys' sense of kind of any given year, that this is a team that because they can be a little unusual, they're such a threat that way?
So, just over the years, we always know Stanford's a big physical team. They big personnels, all across the board, whether it's open field in the red zone, short yards, things like that. So, we just got to play big and we got to be physical. So it's going to be a physical game. It's always been a physical game. So that's pretty much what we expect.
They're known as a DB. They're known, too, for 50-50 balls that their guys go up and win. Mm-hmm. is that something they're still doing a fair amount? And is that something you feel like you guys really need to be ready for this week?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's definitely part of what they are. And, especially like in the red zone, they're throwing fade balls because, they got those big, tall guys, tall receivers, big tight ends. They try to box you out, things like that. So we definitely expect that. We're definitely working on that at practice.
What about Tanner McKee? Stands out on tape to you?
Oh, man, I think he's a very smart quarterback, very smart, real good decision maker. He knows how to diagnose the defense with his reads and everything like that. So I think he's a very talented player.
Such big contrasts between Wazoo, what they're trying to do offensively, and Stanford. Thompson's, I think, 3rd in the conference in passing yards. Stanford's quarterback McKee, I think he's 11th. So what have you seen, like, as a contrast from last week to this week, what you guys are doing defensively?
So, like I said earlier, Stanford, big personnel team, and compared to Wazoo, they had a lot of speed guys, a lot of 4 open sets, so they're flying guys around, things like that. So a lot of skilled players, and then, with Stanford, they got a lot of big personnel, big running backs, things like that. So we definitely, more base, nickel, and big personnel as well. So
we're seeing your guys' offense do some of that. Throw an extra lineman out there, play all the tight ends. Are you guys facing that enough in practice? Can that be helpful for you at all going into this week?
Oh, for sure. I feel like we have great tight ends, from T. Ferg to John Blanks, from all our tight ends, Monteval, yeah. So, Cam McCormick, all those guys. So I feel like we're getting a great look when we are doing our good on good periods, to kind of resemble what we're going to get on Saturday.
Wilson's a receiver for them that big plays. I think he averages over 20 yards per catch. Just as a safety, the importance of no one behind you, is that stressed a little bit more in a game like this against a guy like that?
No, for sure. It comes with the territory. So you don't want to get guys behind you. So you definitely want to take note where he's at. He's a big part of their offense. So that comes with formation recognition, just knowing where he's at and when they're trying to get the ball in his hands.
How are you feeling individually, just with all the reps now, the game reps you have under your belt the last few weeks? How comfortable do you feel at this point, and just in this role, kind of finally at this stage of your career?
So honestly, I would say I'm comfortable as far as where I'm at, but at the same time, I'm being very detailed in my approach. With my film study, with how I'm taking my reps on the field, and make sure I'm staying in my stance, bending my knees, reading my keys, just sticking to the basics. Because I'm comfortable, but I want to keep myself uncomfortable at the same time. If that makes sense.
An 8 p.m. start's it's a late start for you guys this year. What are you doing specifically to prepare yourselves for that game?
So being at 8 p.m., that's a little bit later than what we typically been getting these past couple games, and I just feel like that's more time to prep, more time to hydrate, more time to get ready for the game. So it's a little bit different, but I feel like it allows us to play well.
You guys talked about the way last year's game went down in Stanford and how tough that was, and has that added ammunition this week, or is that even needed?
So in the defense, we're big on no wasted pain. So things that hurt us last season, we're going to make sure to try not to bring that to this game, and just make sure we do things better than what we did last time. Things like that.
What were some of the things last year that hit you? I guess penalties being a big one at the end.
Like I said, play smart, discipline football. Me personally, getting off blocks. Last year I feel like I kind of stuck on blocks a little bit too long, just striking with my hands, getting off blocks. Defeating the blocks, go make a play.
He's not necessarily like a scrambling quarterback, but he's not scared to tuck in and go. How do you feel like you guys have sort of handled, quarterbacks that run the ball at the same?
Just you got to stay disciplined. Whoever's on the edge, make sure you're keeping their edge. If you're a blitzer, whether if the back's to you, you want to make sure you read in the back, and if the back's away, make sure you contain the quarterback, things like that. So things like that, just reading our keys, being disciplined, and we'll be fine.
How do you feel like you guys have competed against that this year so far?
So we've honestly dealt with a lot of scrambling quarterbacks. So at least on the back end, we have to do a lot of plastering, make sure we're plastering, and just trying to cage the quarterback best we can. So it definitely, I would say we have struggled at times, but we're trying to make sure we no wasted pain. So
I think eye discipline is going to be really important in this game. With that in mind, because it's not just eye discipline isn't just about when you're doing a read pass or run pass option, right? And you're doing a read from a defensive perspective. I think for a team like Stanford, you have to take it a step further because you got tight ends that might have a little chip block and then they're rolling out, and Tanner McKee seems to be really good at finding those guys. That's what Stanford's been known for, those jump balls. We'll see what happens. I think Oregon's DBs are rising to the occasion, though. I'm looking forward to this matchup. When we come back, some details on Oregon baseball. They're scrimmaging while you're tailgating, and you can come in and watch for free. More coming up on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
At Shadow Hills Country Club, our all-inclusive event pricing allows us to take care of all of the details while you enjoy your event. Our wedding garden, expansive grounds, ballroom, and meeting rooms can accommodate any size event and come complete with full catering and service staff. From weddings to business and social events, Shadow Hills offers the benefits of a resort atmosphere and the peace of a country setting just minutes from downtown Eugene. For more details, call us today or go to shadowhillsevents.com.
From the weight room to the classroom, on the field and off it, On Point proudly supports University of Oregon athletics because student athletes do so much more than bring us pride on game day. They bring our entire community together in Eugene and all across Oregon. So whether you're watching the game in the stadium, at home, or at your favorite local business, their success makes all of us stronger. On Point Community Credit Union, onpointcu.com. Federally insured by NCUA, Equal Housing Opportunity.
More Duck Insider coming up on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Question: what will you find on all over-the-counter or OTC medicine packages to help you choose the right drug and use it safely? The answer: the drug facts label. This label lists the medicine's active ingredients and purpose, how much to take, and warnings you should know before using it. Remember, even OTC medicines you buy without a prescription can cause side effects you don't want. So follow the information listed on the drug facts label. For more information, visit fda.gov/drug facts label. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
Some of the best sounds you'll ever hear are generic, safe, effective, even money-saving, just like FDA-approved generic drugs. Even if they don't come in the exact same color or shape as their brand name equivalents, they have the same key ingredients and go through a rigorous review process. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today and visit fda.gov/generic drugs. Generics are safe, effective, and can save you money. You'll like the sound of that.
Back inside the Country Financial Studio, Duck Insider, presented by On Point Community Credit Union. More details now available on GoDucks.com. Oregon baseball's fall scrimmage schedule has been released. Team will hold its first of 15 fall scrimmages on Saturday, 2:30 p.m. at PK Park before the Ducks football game against Stanford. Tailgaters, other fans encouraged to attend. Free admission to all scrimmages. Full schedule is available on GoDucks.com. Most of the scrimmages are going to be either on Saturdays or Sundays, and with football going on, the Ducks have said, Mark Wasikowski has said, yeah, if there's a football game, we're going to scrimmage and you can come in as a tailgater. Now remember, concessions will not be sold at any of the scrimmages, so fans are encouraged to bring their own food and drink. I'll say that again. Fans are encouraged to bring their own food and drink. Awesome. Love that they're doing this at PK Park. Great chance to get to know the team. I'm really looking forward to being out there for at least a little bit on Saturday before we get rolling with football. That's going to be a fun time. So Oregon baseball, more details available at GoDucks.com. Your Toyota Women's Sports Schedule Spotlight tonight. Oregon soccer, 7 o'clock, Pape Field against #1 UCLA. Get a big win. If you can't be there, Ryan Milano's got the call. We'll see you tomorrow for picks.
Unused prescription opioid pain medicines can spell trouble. They can spell risk if taken by someone they weren't prescribed for, harm if accidentally taken by a child or pet, or overdose if they're not used as directed. Safely dispose of opioids before they can hurt your family. Find a drug take-back option such as medicine drop boxes. You may find